Here's my review of Dream Scenario. I thought that this movie was great, and it really had everything I wanted from this movie and then some. I mean, Nicolas Cage is, of course, kills it, as always, one of my favorite actors. I love him, and and there's no exception here, he's just as good here as he is in everything else. Where this time he plays a college professor, a psych professor, I believe, named Paul Matthews, who is just an average guy until he starts to appear in people's dreams. And that's kind of where that's clearly the basis of this movie, but as it goes on, it kind of gets darker and darker as this isn't a horror movie. This is a comedy, and it is very funny. I mean, Nick Cage's comedic timing is just on point and everything. But the stories and how he's appearing in their dreams of these, whether it's students' dreams or just everybody's dreams, and it progressively gets more and more people, it gets darker and darker, and it allows for this movie to not only have fit multiple genres, and it all just works seamlessly, and it never really feels like it out of place. Like, it is consistently funny because Nicolas Cage is just naturally funny, but it also gets very horrifying because at first he's appearing in these dreams, but I mean, these dreams soon become nightmares. And so progressively we're kind of seeing almost just this, like, Paul, just kind of this kind of nerdy guy, and it just kind of progressively gets darker and darker. And I mean, this is a role, I mean, at least I haven't really seen Nick do in that many of other movies, but I thought that he pulls it off great here. He's able to just kind of pull off this, like, super dirty guy. But I mean, I don't know what it is, but somehow he still comes across as cool. But that's just me, maybe just because I just think he's so entertaining. But he's just this college professor, and at the beginning he's talking about, like, biology, and he does that, and that does come into play a little bit later, but it's not, like, super important. He kind of talks, though, about, like, a little bit, I think, of the brain, what dreams mean, and because I think he's also a psych teacher, I believe, but it just kind of sets up the basis of this movie. In terms of there's a lot of dramatic emotional beats because you almost feel like between him and his wife are kind of separating because of this, and because the dreams are getting, like, darker, she feels she's rejected in places that she goes because she's the husband of this man who keeps having the dreams of Paul. And it's allows for this movie, like I said, to have just a very great emotional core to it between these characters. And also, I mean, he also has two daughters, and it's just sad because, like in scenes like this, like, he's seeing his daughters, like, kind of fly away in these dream sequences that are just always very cool, and it allows for it to feel like a sense of, whoa, that's kind of cool, but also it's a sense of horror, and that's what I really liked about this movie, is that it tackles so many of these genres, I think, so perfectly, and it's all encapsulated, and it's all, like, completely pulled together by Nick Cage's performance, as he's just always able to be funny, but also has very dramatic moments. And also because these are dreams, and how they describe it, he's kind of just there, and they don't really have a reason for it. And so you can get a lot of creative stuff, like with alligators, and there's, like, a bunch of kind of cool scenes with that. And it's really just kind of the tone, as when they show the dreams, he's just there, and it's just kind of creepy, and it's just in the back of your mind. You're like, what's really going on? And so maybe you can kind of, like, put pieces together as you watch the movie, and it's just interesting because you're seeing it slowly almost be very lighthearted and fun, and then you just see how it slowly gets worse and worse of what's in these dreams. And it's interesting because this is a very interesting character of Paul. Is, you know that he's a good guy, but then in some of the things he does, I mean, of course in the dreams, I mean, it's just a dream. But then even in real life, like, he almost, like, has an affair, kind of almost cheats on his wife. He does. And there's a lot of stuff here where, in a way, I mean, he's not really, he does, but he doesn't. He's at least not trying to. But he's able to pull it off in such a way where, like, he's almost does this bad thing, but you don't believe that he really would do it. You still believe that he's a good person. And that's just because, I mean, Nick Cage is just so naturally charismatic. But it's interesting is as these dreams get darker, like you hear about this one kid who he's almost like in this one, Paul's like almost trying to kill him, and these just get darker and darker. And they even make like a Freddy Krueger reference, which I thought was great because I mean he basically is the Freddy Krueger of this movie. I mean, going into these people's dreams and just terrifying them. And I thought it was just done really good. Like I said, this movie is so good. It allows for it to capture so many different emotions and so many different genres. With whenever it kind of goes really dark and really horror, it really shines. And with the creativity of like when he's with some of his students at the university and in these visions of it's just almost like shaky cam and it's kind of getting your heart like racing, and it allows for you to almost just feel just the intensity of the whatever dream of the person who's dreaming this in the first place, and it just feels the real horror. But it's interesting because as this movie goes on, you could see how it's negatively affecting his life. Like he goes to a diner and they like don't even want him here. People keep complaining about him because they're basically scared of him. I mean, because I mean he's the man of their dreams. I mean, but he's killing them in their dreams, and just these awful, horrifying things are happening. And at the same time, I mean, it's very conflicting because I mean, yes, you're like, hey, that's unfair. It's not Paul's fault that they're having these dreams. But at the same time, you completely understand, I mean, why they would be terrifying. I mean, they're seeing somebody who they're terrified of and who they saw do these horrible, despicable things. And even when you do see this happen, it's still done in a way where you're never really rooting against Paul, even if you're seeing him do terrible things. At least because it's not really real. And it's interesting because at first throughout this movie, he gets very famous because, of course, he's appearing in all these dreams. And then like I said, like he's getting more revered and more just like scared of. And so you go from this man who's super famous and everyone loves him, and later on he's depicted as just this terrible person. I mean, in the dreams, this murderer and other words that I can't say. And although none of it's shown, or certain things aren't shown, you understand the horror and why these people are afraid of him. But at the same time, it does such a good job in you know that Paul's a good guy. And it ends on a note where he does this like public apology through a live stream because everyone hates him. And it just ends in a very interesting way because you still feel bad for him, but you still completely understand why everyone hates him. And it's interesting because like also throughout this movie, he's trying to write a novel, and he's almost trying to like sell it to publishing companies. And of course, this doesn't really. It feels like a big part. I feel like that was a weird part because it feels like a major plot point, but at the same time, it doesn't. And I don't really know how or why, but it just feels like it's kind of underdeveloped a little bit. But it's interesting because you still hear about this, by all means, like very humble, kind of like chill guy, and he still is interesting because he has these massive ambitions, and you don't really think he'll ever amount to them, and that's what kind of makes him just a very almost tragic character. I mean, because at the end of the movie, not only is he didn't really accomplish his dreams, but I mean, he's also feared. So yeah, I thought though that this movie was amazing. I really, really liked it. I think it had basically the right amount of everything. Great comedy, awesome like horror, and also great dramatic scenes between like all of the characters, especially Janet and Paul. So yeah. So yeah, I think that this movie is great, and I think it is the best movie of November. And yeah, it was really, really good.